An OLED screen is one of those features that I love having on a handheld device. Because of the bright screen with super high contrast colors and deep blacks, it just makes the handheld more appealing. I do have the Steam Deck OLED, the Nintendo Switch OLED, the PS Vita OLED, and the Retro Pocket 5, which all have some sort of OLED screen to them. They all have beautiful screens, but I can't just stop there for sure. The Nintendo Switch Lite is one of my favorite portable handhelds I picked up recently. I do like playing Nintendo exclusives, and I did finish a couple more games on the Switch than on the Steam Deck or even my PC. There's just one thing missing though from this great handheld: the screen. The Switch Lite would have been the perfect device essentially if it had a nicer screen. So for today's video, I picked up a screen for myself, the Super5 Oled. And we're going to do that mod now and see how different it is compared to these other OLED screens. Starting off with this mod, Taki did prepare a couple of essential tools that you could use if you don't have them already. It does come with a new plate, suction cup for the screen, a screw organizer, and some other tools such as tweezers, screwdrivers with 2 different heads, a pick, and also a wedge. And with this mod, I do recommend getting yourself some thermal paste just so you can replace it with what's already in the Nintendo Switch Lite. And of course, the screen itself. It also comes with some sort of screen protector too. So first, I would suggest using the Y ones instead. You can start removing the 4 screws on the back, and then you can switch it over to the Phillips head. So you can start removing the 2 screws up top and 2 screws on the bottom. Then you can start wedging it from the trigger buttons and just popping the back shell a little bit so you can have space and start sliding the pick across the whole device. Once you get enough of a gap, don't try forcing the back plate off completely because it might damage the back plate unless you're doing the whole shell swap. And then you can start seeing the full back piece. So I started putting the Nintendo Switch Lite on the back of the box just so it can be lifted and elevated, easier for me to start handling the rest of the disassembly. So what's great about this mod is that there are no soldering needed. All it is just taking off a couple of parts and then you can start putting it back together. So there are 4 screws you can start taking off this back plate. There are 2 at the bottom, 1 up top, and 1 right under the fan. After we remove that, we can start removing the cooler. So there are 4 screws for the cooler as well. After you remove those 4, you can start peeling the cooler off, and being very careful, just place it upside down onto the metal plate where the other thermal paste is. You can also start removing the screws for the USB-C just so we can move the motherboard later on as well. After removing the cooler, you can start removing the cartridge. So there'll be 4 screws on the yellow part of the cartridge, and then there are 4 screws on the audio jack as well. And they're stuck together with 1 ribbon. So make sure you remove all 8 screws before you start pulling on the ribbon cable. Once removed there, you can start seeing the OLED display ribbon cable and also the touch portion of the ribbon cable. These ribbon cables are very sensitive, so be very careful when you're flipping them open to take them out if you're planning on keeping the screen. I also make sure to unplug not only the 2 ribbon cables for display and the touch, but there's also another ribbon on the right side of the Switch Lite. This ribbon cable right here, you will want to unplug that one as well. That way, when you start removing the screen, it'll be easier to pull out without tugging on any of the cables. So once you detach both of those ribbon cables, you can start working on the screen. Before starting on the screen, I did clean off the old thermal paste just so it wouldn't leave a mess afterwards. I'm also going to take off the screen protector for the old display as well, so it wouldn't get in the way of the suction cup when I'm trying to remove the screen. Once that is all set, here I am grabbing the hair dryer to start on the edges of the screen so I can lift it up a little bit and put in the pick, and so I can start working around the edges of the screen. I was able to get off a little bit of the glue, and I'm just going to slowly and take my time go around the screen. And whenever I start feeling some kind of tug where it doesn't move that much, I start using a blow dryer again to weaken the adhesive. And here it is, the screen comes right off just like that. Now here's the hard part. I did the mistake of not removing the whole motherboard completely because I didn't want to go through that assembly, but eventually I had to do that. When I started doing this mod, I didn't realize that Taki Udon started posting another video showing an easier way on swapping the screen. So I'm going to be struggling here, but later on you will see that I did start removing the plastic piece under the motherboard a little bit, just so I can start moving in those cables. That's also a bad way of doing things. You would want to remove everything completely where you're just left with the front shell. That way, when you start putting on the screen, the ribbon cable can be adjusted easier and you wouldn't make any damages to it. So make sure when you're doing this mod yourself to start removing everything just so you get the front shell by itself. That way it's a lot easier to install that new screen. And after I plugged it in, I started putting back everything and re-plugging in all those ribbon cables. We're going to take this extra ribbon cable that was inside the Super5 OLED packaging. We're going to use the connector that is inside the case and connect it to the module and then to the motherboard. This would leave the battery cable by itself. We're going to reconnect that ribbon cable that is covering the battery connector. We're going to go back to the right side of the switch and connect that last ribbon cable. The other ribbon cable that was from the screen at the bottom of the battery, we're going to connect that to the module as well. So after we connect that, I connect the battery. I didn't reconnect the cartridge, so I'm going to unplug the battery here again so I can put in the cartridge and the audio jack. Now we can reconnect the battery. And we're just going to clean things up a little bit by adding some Coptic tape. And now everything is looking nice and clean. So right here, this OLED screen looks awesome. It's running perfectly fine. The only issue is that my touch screen doesn't register any dragging motion. So I did damage the cable for the touchscreen portion, and because of that, I'm not able to actually drag my finger across the screen to draw any lines. Where I can only use the touchscreen for inputs, I can't really do anything like scrolling. That's why you would want to take apart the motherboard completely, just so you're left with the front shell, and then you start your screen modding from there. So this OLED screen is pretty cool. There are several different modes with it where you can adjust the brightness. The blue tint screen I heard was some sort of developer mode just to do some testing, but I did leave it as the default setting where I do like the colors popping a little bit more and there is a deeper contrast in the screen in general. And other than that, this OLED screen looks amazing. Astro's Chain does look a little bit better on the Super5 OLED screen compared to the Nintendo Switch OLED, just because of that deeper black in certain areas. I do like how that contrast is there compared to the old Nintendo Switch Lite screen where all the colors were mushy and a little bit faded. But here the colors are more brighter and that contrast just makes everything look a lot sharper. Here are some specs that are listed on the website for the Super5 OLED screen. The only specs that I actually found for the screen would be this chart. So the Super5 OLED screen is running at around 600 nits, 150% sRGB, and has a contrast of 600,000 to 1. While the stock Switch Lite has 400 nits, 99% sRGB, and a contrast ratio of 900 to 1. And last but not least, the Switch OLED has 340 nits, 130% sRGB, and a contrast of 340,000 to 1. Now, if I'm going to be completely honest, I'm not sure what contrast ratio means. Even after looking it up, I'm still not sure. But for nits and sRGB, the difference is pretty big between the stock Nintendo Switch Lite and the Super5 OLED screen. Between the Switch OLED and the Retroremake screen, the Super5 OLED, there's not much of a noticeable difference. You could tell that the Super5 Retroremake screen has a little bit of a darker contrast. The blacks are a little bit darker, a little bit deeper, and there's also a slight boost in colors as well. Now, between the Nintendo Switch OLED and the Switch Lite, I do like the slight boost in colors of the Super5 OLED compared to the Nintendo Switch OLED. For real life experiences with the Super5 OLED, it really does bring life back to the Nintendo Switch Lite. The form factor along with this higher end screen really does make me pick up the Nintendo Switch Lite a lot more often. And I've never finished Astro Chain before, and I'm not gonna lie, it looks amazing on the Nintendo Switch OLED, but the Switch OLED really doesn't beat out the form factor of the Switch Lite. Because of that, I've often been picking up the Switch Lite more, so all I've been doing was catching up on Astral Chain on the Switch Lite with this new Super5 Oled screen. Hopefully I will finish the game now, considering that I went from 503 to 505 now. Even though this Super5 Oled screen is awesome, the mod was semi-difficult to do because I did damage a cable, so now I can't really scroll or anything on this touchscreen. Regardless of that, it does look amazing. My only problem with this screen was the service. The screen did take forever to come. Honestly, there wasn't much transparency, but there was an email that detailed some of the problems that the screen went through in terms of quality. And because of that, for the future, there will be no more OLED touch restocks, and only the standard non-touch OLEDs will be restocked, which is quite unfortunate, but hopefully more of the non-touch standard OLED screens will be restocked. Because most of the games you're playing, you're not really using the touchscreen. It is quite a bummer for me because I really did want to replay The World Ends With You, and that game really does need using the touchscreen, especially the dragging function, which I can't do anymore. So in that case, I would just go back to the regular Nintendo Switch OLED. That's the Super5 Oled screen from Taki. Thank Taki for creating this awesome screen and giving me the chance to bringing back my Switch Lite. Even though recently I picked it up, I still haven't touched it till now. After modding the screen, I couldn't really leave anywhere with it just because of that form factor, and now with this amazing screen pairing up with it, it just makes it a more enticing handheld to pick up. And as always, a great way for you guys to help out this channel is to follow my socials, share this video to a friend that's looking to picking up that Switch Lite again, wiping that dust off and upgrading it. Also, give this video a like and subscribe. Thanks guys. Peace.